What's up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Automatic Patient Podcast. I am your co-host, Jordan Comstock. With me, Dr. Dan Nelson. What's up, Dan? How you doing, man?
Doing good, man. Just feeling the effects of being in Africa for a while.
Yeah, you were there for how long?
2 weeks.
2 weeks. What is the time difference over there?
It's 9 hours, but it feels like 2 weeks. Like
Yeah, it took you a while to recoup from that time change, I would imagine.
yeah, re-entry isn't bad. It's going over there that's rough. Yeah, it's
Really?
super worth it though. So worth it.
Yeah, you're there 2 weeks, and then Jared will be headed there soon as well, you said?
Yep. Jared takes off in 2 weeks actually. And then we left Ryan over there. So it looks
Ryan's
like gone.
Ryan's over there right now.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's like, guys, can I just stay here and work remote? He's like, I don't want to have to deal with flying over, flying back, doing all the recovery. So we're like, yeah, just stay over there.
Just stay there, bro. Yeah.
Yeah, they've got a place in the compound, in the hospital compound that they put him up. So it's working.
That's awesome. Well, welcome back. We're excited to be recording the podcast again. Today we got a special guest. His name is Dr. Addison Killeen. Addison, what is up, dog? So good to have you on the show.
Oh, thanks, man. I'm just so excited, hearing stories of Africa and just mission work. I was just talking with somebody this morning that there's nothing better than being totally wiped, but emotionally your bucket is filled after doing good work. So
That's awesome.
it's exciting to hear.
Yeah, I'd love to go down, Dan. That's like one of my wife's dreams. She worked as a dental assistant for a while, and then as you know, I ran a dental lab, so I can help with like relines, I guess.
There's so much need. It's insane how much need there is.
Yeah.
And on top of all that, we saw a leopard this trip.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, they're hard to find, they're hard to see, and yeah, we found this is my third trip over there that I hadn't seen one, and finally we scored one on the Rufiji River, so I was
Huh,
stoked on that.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, if anybody wants to
Wild.
go to dentallegacyfoundation.org and sign up to volunteer. We got groups going multiple times a year. Check it
I
out.
was gonna say 2 times a year is the cadence typically.
No, it just depends. So, Addison's partner, Mark, came with us back in January. He brought a group with him, awesome group back in January. And then our goal is to get up to, between various groups, get up to 9 trips over there a year. So we're hoping that, this year was 3. We're just growing it each year. So yeah, the more people that volunteer, the easier it is to hit that goal.
Just
And
keep doing it. Yeah,
yeah,
I'll
we're
go
really
check it
trying to
out.
get it sustainable.
Yeah, that's like literally my wife always talks about wanting to do that. And I'm like, yeah, but we also have these three wild girls that we're
Yeah,
raising that we
dude,
got to figure out too.
those munchkins make it tough.
So Addison, we're so pumped to have you on the show. So Addison owns a dental practice, and then he's also partnered with the Dental Success Network with Dr. Mark Costes. So Addison, let's just get started. Tell our audience your story, and
Yeah.
we'll get into it.
Well, just like any, dentist coming out of school, I got out of school, joined a practice as an associate. I thought maybe, my town of 250, 300,000 people was just too saturated. So I went 25 miles outside of town to a small town, joined a practice as an associate. And over the first about 4 months, I figured out that was not the place for me. I was a little bit too much of a control freak, had a little bit too many ideas. Before dental school, I actually worked in the restaurant industry where we had a conglomerate
Oh,
of like a couple of restaurant brands, a brewery, and a defense manufacturing corporation. It was all a front for
okay.
guns. No, actually, not guns. It was machines that erase hard drives. So like every submarine warship, CIA installation, every NATO country has to use specific machines that if things go badly, you have to wipe a hard drive. So I was in that business before I said, hey, I actually want to be my own boss. I want to be a dentist. And I like to use my hands. Well, an associateship was not right for me. So uh, after that, 2012, then, yeah, I joined one practice. And pretty quickly, we scaled from one practice up to 6 practices. Had 10 doctors working for us, 6 different locations.
Hmm.
One of them was a de novo startup. The other 4 that we acquired. And it was fun, but it was also, a little hectic and crazy as you're starting a family. And so basically
Yeah.
in 2018, I sold out, basically took a year off hiatus. And that's kind of when Dr. Mark Costas and I and our core team founded the Dental Success Network. And so I started that up. Now we have a great team that runs that. Um, yeah, we have about 1,400 members, and so I like to write books as well, and so we have a few manuals that are focused on kind of some of the bigger issues that I see every day. The manuals are very, inch wide, a mile deep. So some of them are operations manuals, startup, um, marketing, just any issue that I got enough questions on. I thought this is if I can fill up a couple 100-page book of really detailed instructions on how I did things, it should be at least somewhat useful for other people. And so, but of course, it's okay to write on things that you did, but at a certain point, you got to write on things that you're doing. And so in
Sure.
2019, late in 2019, started up my current practice, which is a startup and called Capital Dental here in Lincoln, Nebraska. And it was back in my hometown. And it's a saturated market, but we've grown from 6 operatories uh, up to now we have 5 doctors in 14 operatories. And so we kind of do a little bit of everything: implants, sedation, um, you know, a lot of ortho, a lot of endo. I have a specialist who's an oral radiologist who's on staff, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. I get to enjoy coming to work every day. Got a pretty sweet um, team to work with. I like a lot of happy people. Got a really nice coffee machine in the break room. So
Sweet. Yeah. That's
yeah,
he makes
it's
it. You've
the
made
the
it.
biggest part of my focus. Yeah, the biggest part of my focus is actually just making sure the patient experience is really good. And if you have a
Yeah.
good patient experience, that's all the marketing you need. Um, for me, it's, our next step is we're re-recording videos, and we're going to text out videos to patients before their new patient appointment. Like 2 days before, we're going to have a nice 2-minute video to meet the doctor, meet, who are the
Mm.
assistants and hygienists you're going to meet, who's the office manager. Because I think the biggest hiccup, or the biggest way that people avoid the dentist, is just from anxiety.
Yeah.
And if you can help them get over that anxiety, you're winning the battle.
One, Addison, every time I go on to like a dental site or a medical site, if, like as a patient, if I can't read about who I'm going to go see, like I don't want to go. Right.
Mhm.
Or watch a video of who's behind the practice walls. Right. That's the hardest thing for me. Most uh practices, when they don't have that on the website, it makes it really hard for patients to really have trust to go to the dentist.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of the corporate model, because a lot of, if you're in corporate, you might be switching out doctors, you might be switching team members quite
Sure.
frequently, and patients want to feel, like your own medical doctor, your optometrist, your veterinarian. You kind of want to have a connection. You want to feel like you know them, and so, yeah, I mean, I think that's just important in any sense, but especially when people are already that anxious and nervous to want to come into a dentist. And I mean, we just know from statistics, it's a blue ocean of people out there that don't use the dentist. So you got
Hmm.
to
Oh
overcome
yeah.
every barrier. I mean, and you guys, the financial barriers better than anybody, but it's also the
Yeah.
anxiety. And, in this day and age, post COVID, you're seeing more anxiety in people now than ever. And so just
Yeah,
helping
that's
them
interesting.
overcome that by familiarity, and offering drugs too. Drugs helps, like laughing gas, IV
That's your
sedation, oral
quote. Drugs
sedation.
help. Sweet.
Yeah,
That's what we'll
That's,
put. Drugs help
there's,
patients.
and we're done here. That's it. All right, try. We're done.
All right.
good
Yeah.
title of
Mic
this
drop.
I think,
podcast.
yeah, I think you're right though. What you're really talking about is the trust, right? So building that trust, and you can't have trust
Trust
if
and
you don't know
rapport.
somebody. You have to build rapport, and yeah, I think that's pretty brilliant to have them already feeling like they can relate or know somebody in the office. They might even request somebody, when you send something like that out. Addison, you said 2 things that I really want to touch on in this podcast. And both involve associates. One, you said that associateship wasn't for you, and I feel you on that. Like I definitely was in that same boat. And then the second thing you said was that you have 433 associates that work for you right now. Anything above two feels like 433. So I want I want to get into a little bit about um, some of the challenges that come with having associates, because one of the things that
Yeah.
you also said was about having a really good patient experience. And everybody that scaled knows, as you scale, it becomes difficult to control the patient experience because you're
Yeah.
just introducing so many factors. So first I want to touch on why was it that an associateship wasn't right for you?
Yeah, I'm the kind of guy that when you go into Target, if the line is more than 3 or 4 people deep and there's workers sitting there that just aren't checking people out, I start getting fidgety and I'm ready to freak out. So I just see inefficiencies and they grind at me to unending levels of degree. And
Yeah.
so for me, when I'm sitting in a dental practice and I see team members that maybe aren't doing or aren't being held accountable, or just systems that aren't efficient, it was just really crazy because back in the restaurant industry, we were
Mm.
so anal about every, even the thermostat, like how much energy are we using? Because in a restaurant industry where you're making 2 to 6% profit, you make a couple small errors
Errors.
and you drop from 6% to like 1%, or
Jeez.
you're dropping down. And so just the level of managerial accounting we had to do in the restaurants and the brewery was to such a degree that when I got into the dental industry and I saw wild inefficiencies, it just drove me nuts. And
Yeah.
so that's kind of why associateship wasn't for me. Now that I've gone on a little bit longer in my career, it's all the other fun things that I love about ownership, like getting to develop people, getting to teach them leadership, and eventually like seeing them blossom outside the practice. I've had multiple people that I've pushed and I say, "Hey, you're too smart to be here. You need to go back to
Yeah.
school." And now they're like assistants that are now hygienists or front desk people that now are like, "Oh, maybe I do want to be a dentist." And they're a dentist owner themselves now. And so I
That's
mean, some of
cool.
those things are just really joyful, but that's kind of second order of the joy of being an owner, I think. But yeah, that's kind of what drove me out of associateship. Um, yeah, I agree with you though. Once you start hiring associates, yeah, one is manageable, two is a little crazy,
So it was
three
like
is
433.
yeah, it's like you're playing football and you instantly get put on an NFL roster and you're like, I don't know what I'm doing here. Um, and that's where so much of the work, and I've made all the mistakes. So I mean, in my group practice previous life, I made some mistakes, didn't hire the right people, didn't set the right expectations,
Yeah, we've all
didn't
done
put the
that. Yeah.
right guardrails around what should be done. So I've seen, it work really not well. And where both sides get frustrated. I think unmet or
Sure.
unsaid expectations are a huge driver of dissatisfaction and why a lot of associates leave. They said, well, I was promised this many new patients and then this didn't happen, or I was
Mm.
promised 2 columns and that I'm only getting 1 column. So, the communication or the belief that it happened when it didn't really happen is what drives so many issues. And so when you can start a relationship or an associateship with better expectations, clearer outlines, a kind of a handbook of how things are done here in this practice. Every DSO out there invests so much time in continuing education, and it's really, I won't call it brainwashing, but it's just the things of this is how it's done here, and they're really good at that. And sometimes in our, a small town practice where you're bringing on your first associate or even your second, and you're like, well, I don't know why that first one didn't work out. They just didn't work hard enough. And it's like, well, maybe you weren't clear enough in your expectations, or maybe we should both say them, write them down, and review them every month. And when those expectations are very clear and you have a really good handbook of this is how we do things here in this office, that's when associateships like tend to work out a lot higher chance. Now, there's always those times when you meet a gal and she says, "Well, I'm moving to New York," and you're like, "Well, okay, I'm moving to New York too." There's always those life chances or life events that happen, but generally,
Sure.
though, it's unmet or unset expectations that generally lead to failed associateships.
So
Yeah, yeah.
you're talking a bit about basically policies and processes, those types of things. Um, there's a fine line to be had because it's especially with the takeover of the DSO, right? The DSO comes in and they say, hey, come work for us. You're going to have a lot of autonomy. You're going to be able to do the things that you want to do. You're going to be able to have, and some are very good at delivering on that,
Sure.
but so we're up against that as a small group practice owner or a small practice owner if we want to bring in associates. So you have all these processes, protocols, policies. There's a fine line between making sure those are established and that you have those in place to make sure that you have a quality control component and that you have a good patient experience. Our patients have a good experience when they come in, but also like leaving a certain amount of autonomy to the associates. So what have you found? What's that balancing act look like for you and your offices?
Yeah, I always love to make sure they know how I do things first, and
Mm,
making sure that they do it my way 5 to 10 times. And I try to teach them like, hey, there's a reason why before I ever pick up an instrument or put my mask on, that I talk to them and build rapport. That like you were saying, the
sure.
rapport is so important. So make sure, and then it kind of gets into the system of make sure you ask 3 personal questions, like learn about their family, just get them going. You'll find something to connect with them on. Once you have a connection or a rapport built up, okay, then cross the clinical barrier and pick up an instrument or put your gloves on, put your mask on. As long as they feel like you know them as a person, you can then treat them as a patient. So um, I make sure that my associates know, you got to learn 3 things about them. And then you can start to solve their problem. And you usually start with chief complaint. Uh, and as long as they do things my way 5 to 10 times, if they still want to go back to a different way of doing things, at least from a procedure standpoint, or if they want to try some other equipment or try some other dental supplies, I'm good with that. But there's some limits. Like I'm not going to order the most expensive, crazy stuff. What we would have to see, is there an ROI or is there a clinical
Test it
reason
out.
or is
Yeah.
there some study to
Like
prove why we should do this?
90% should be do what's working. 10,
Exactly.
20% innovate. At least
Yeah.
that's my rule here.
And maybe it's like what's working best in your hands. Like some of
Yeah.
my associates love to
Sure.
use certain, class 2 composite systems that I'm like, just doesn't work in my hands. Like I'm old school. I'm going to go back to what I know, what I do really quickly, what I do well.
Sure.
And so I'm like, yeah, you guys use the new stuff, and that's totally okay. But at least as long as you know how to do it well and the outcome is good, I'm good with it. So, and
Yeah.
efficiency where it's smart. It's not all that we have to be efficient. And I'm going to give you 1 drop of bonder for the case. Uh, there's places to be
Yeah,
efficient, and then there's
that's
places
restaurant efficiency right
to
there.
exactly.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like you just got to take your wins where you can get them. And I think the biggest win is the patient experience. And if they have a good experience, I mean, it's playing the long game. I think corporate, and maybe it's this Wall Street mindset of you need to have instant profits and we need to drive up stock price. It needs to be a win right now. Whereas I think the beauty of being a dental practice owner is I'm looking for a 20-year decision. Like I want to win and have a
With that
gradual
patient.
glide
Yeah.
path of 20 years of building up a patient relationship. Um, I'm not looking to get the most revenue out of the patient right now. And so
Sure.
if I have to give away a freebie or, just be like, hey, you know what, I'm going to give
To
you
help the
half off
patient
this
out.
case. Yeah,
Sure.
that's going to build more marketing dollars and more momentum towards future success than anything else you could do.
Well, that's
Sure.
that old adage, right? Of people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. You know, it's a little cliche, but it's super true. And it's
My
interesting.
our
uh,
customer success team is always saying that. They got a sign out here that says that.
Yeah, it's true.
Fitting for what they do, yes.
Yeah, and the other side of that is that you don't it's hiring an associate's always a gamble. You don't know what you're gonna you interview and you ask like I'm a pretty vicious interviewer. Like I ask a lot of questions and I ask
Yeah.
hard questions and I put them on the spot. I want them to see how they react when they're, asked weird questions and
Yeah. We like to ask the like ideal team player. If you read that book by Patrick Lencioni, we have a whole process of asking those questions. They're the weird questions that make them squirm a little bit, right?
yeah,
We like that
yeah.
too.
You,
We have a
you
long
have
interview process and
It
yeah,
has to be long. Yeah, that's the other thing is that you can't figure someone out in a short time. But even if you do
yeah.
all that, you still don't really know who you're getting. And
There's there's people that fall through the cracks and know
yeah.
how to navigate those types of questions.
Well, and what I liked at Addison that you said was this three question protocol that you have is smart because if you have a new associate, like a new doc, they might just be nervous in general and forget to ask questions and get to know the patient. Or if you have we all know that weird classmate that like had really good hands but was socially inept, and so
Yeah, yeah,
like, you kind of caught you, especially for those of us that are a bit more social, to make the mistake of thinking that everybody thinks like we do, and is going to react
Sure.
we do with a patient. And instead they just go in and make it awkward and weird. And, maybe they're fantastic, do fantastic weird work, but the patient's weirded out by their mannerisms and their interactions. So I
Yeah,
think
I
that
know, like I'm picturing one dentist right now that I like know of that
we all
you're
know.
talking to him to a T, right?
Yeah. Yeah. We've all been to dinner with that doc, right?
Like, wow, he really knows how to prep the margins, but holy smokes, he's weird. You know?
Well,
So
and that's like when I've had people ask me, okay, I'm interviewing an associate. I love like you got to ask a ton of questions, like 50 to 100 questions. And part of it's just how they react to the question, not as much their answer, but how do they perceive, how do they communicate? If you're just talking about family stuff, how do you chit chat back and forth? Like chit chat
is there
is rapport
synergy?
building.
Yeah. Yeah. Is
Yeah.
there synergy
It's like
between the
wavelength of energy. I know it's something crazy like that. But then some people will say, well, I've got these two candidates. What do I do? They both seem good. They both came good education, highly recommended. And my biggest sticking point or the point that I'll go back to with them is if you were to coach the associate, you're going to have to spend hours and hours with this person,
yeah.
coaching them, fixing their mistakes potentially, or pointing out their
Yeah.
mistakes. Who would you feel more comfortable having a drink with and sitting down for an hour and coaching them? Like relationally, who do you feel more comfortable with? And that's who I would go with because you're going to have to be so
So
invested in them
vulnerability
and you're going
based
to want to
trust.
spend time. Yeah. So you're going to need to trust them and trust that they will, like Patrick Lencioni said, humble, hungry, and smart. They need to be
Yeah.
emotionally smart to take that feedback that you're going to give them.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great book for all of our listeners. Go get the ultimate, I think it's the ultimate team player or the ideal team player, excuse me.
Ideal
Ideal.
team
Yep.
player. Yeah, it's
And
quoted in like five of the books.
yeah, we actually built like we use Chat GPT and we like dump all of Patrick's components of that book into our Chat GPT for an interview process. And we record all of our interviews,
Smart.
right? And we put it in and we're like, hey, help us analyze all this. We ask all the questions, right, that Patrick recommends in the book. It's been a game changer for us as we're not only like hiring new people. Like I don't hire associates, but I do hire associates in a way like, but they're not working on teeth. They're working on sales, or you know what I mean? They're working on marketing. They do lots of things of our business here at Boom Cloud. So there's some universal uh, processes that definitely relate back into the practice of hiring associates. But yeah, we use ChatGPT as our process to help us analyze the people at scale because we're interviewing all the time in a lot of different roles. And I think that's been really helpful to help us scale and get that just really perfected with Patrick's methodology because we love that methodology. It's super, and we even have a graph where it's like, where do they sit? You know, in the book, he's got like nicknames. It's like, if he's not hungry or smart, or if he's smart, if the person is smart and what's the other one? It's humble. He's the lovable slacker. He or she's a lovable slacker, right? We have a map of when people take an interview, it like puts them on the Patrick's like little uh spectrum of
Yeah.
people, right?
Yeah.
That we're like, okay, if we do hire this person because we like them, like how much effort, do we have to do to coach them up to make them the true ideal team player? Same thing with our internal people that we've already hired. Like we're going back and we're Justin, my twin brother, he runs all operations here. So all the geeky stuff, right, that we're talking about today. He'll go back and get people taking these assessments, and then we analyze and help coach and are always trying to do that. And as you scale, it does get harder. Here's a question that I have, aside from all that interviewing process, like what are some of the KPIs you look for hiring associates? Do people I literally last week was at a mastermind at Dr. Eric Roman's house. He lives here in Utah. And there was a lot of people in the industry. There were practice owners, there were CEOs of software companies, there were consultants. It was an awesome group. And one of the practice owners got up, we did hot seats and talked about our challenges. And I think he has 3 associates and he's trying to scale, and he feels like everything's a mess, right? I'm sure you both have witnessed or gone through some type of process there. What are some of the KPIs practice owners should look at to even know if it's right to hire and onboard an associate?
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's one of them is the feeling. Like, are you tired? Are you overworked? Are you stressed?
Okay.
And is it because you're doing too much dentistry? I mean, there's, of course,
Yeah.
the
What's
other side of
burning
it
you
is,
out? Yeah, sure.
yeah. And so, obviously, if you're thinking of bringing in an associate, you have to have physical facility or you have to have
Yeah.
time available. So,
Okay.
if you have 6 operatories, yeah, you can have 2 dentists working at the same time.
Sure.
It's a little tight. That's okay. If you have 3 operatories, it's not going to work.
Geez,
Even
yeah.
4, pretty much not going to work unless you then split your time up and you run split shift, maybe
Yeah,
2 days, 2.5 or 3, whatever. But the larger the facility, better. That's
So
good.
6+ ops is ideal.
Yeah, ideal. Yeah, dental DSOs like corporate will not most of the time purchase practices under 6 operatories because they
Interesting.
know 6 is the number where you could conceivably have 2 doctors working simultaneously, and it's a risk mitigating factor that one gets sick, one leaves.
Yeah, sure.
You could at least have one still there. So
E-
6 is a
easiest
great number.
easiest dam to scaling is physical size of the practice. Yeah, you can't.
Yeah.
That's a logistic nightmare.
Yeah,
Sure. Yeah.
and it
Bumping
could
into
drive
each other.
everybody
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah. So then the next is, do you have patient load? One of the things is like how many routine periodic exams you're doing. Now, if you're below 80 periodic exams each month, which I mean, you're thinking 80, that's 20 per week. A lot of folks will do 20 in a day. So, but if you're
Sure.
below 80, yeah, that's low. If you're between 80 and
80 patients
125,
a month. 80 patients a month.
a
Is that what you
month
said?
routine, hygiene checks per se.
Sure. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
below 80 is pretty low. 80 to
Okay.
125 is about a normal to low. I would say normal to low. Um, Now this is for the average dentist across kind of, new dentist, medium spectrum dentist, older dentist.
Sure.
Some people will be
Mm.
in the 125 to 160 range. Now this is where you're high. For a new dentist, 160 is a lot of exams. For an
But
experienced
for an
dentist, once you've
experienced,
been out a decade, 160 is not that bad.
No big
And
deal.
also, these are routine. So you already know the patient. You walk in, say, "How's the kids?" Oh, you go to the football
boom,
game.
boom,
You
boom.
already
Yeah.
kind of you already have a relationship built. It's easy. And that's where your 3 to 5 minute exam, if nothing major comes up, it's like in and out. You're great. We'll see you later.
Sure.
It's over 160, whereas what we call the danger zone. And why we call it the danger zone over 160 routine exams per month is because that's where you tend to see statistically treatment planning dollars drop off. So you're
Okay.
doing too many exams and you're like, oh, I got to get in, do exam, got to get out. And you're
A
like
lot of
trying to
people are
balance
falling
your
through the cracks
workload.
then.
But then, yeah, treatment planning is not happening. So you see a funky, like graphical thing happen is that your production will spike one month then because you didn't have enough time to treatment plan, you don't treatment plan enough and your
Boom,
production
boom,
falls
boom.
like a
Yeah,
sine
yeah.
wave. And then you're sitting around on your hands and you're like, well, now I got time to do treatment plans. And your next month goes up. And so you see a sine wave effect month by month. And you're
That's
like, I'm doing
interesting.
great this month. I'm doing horrible. And it's like you're bipolar.
It's
And
feast and
I talked
famine.
to yeah, and I
Yeah,
talked to Dennis about this, and I'm like, you're doing too many exams. Count your exam load. Like,
yeah.
well, I'm at 185. You're like, yeah, it's time for an associate. So that's just routine exams. Now, of course, you're going to still stack on some emergency exams and some new patient exams like comprehensives. And those kind of factor into it. But that's kind of my first check of like, oh, if you're over 160, 180, yeah, it might be time for an associate. And then, of course, though, associates live
Okay.
and die by new patients. So you got to be able to generate new patients.
So you got to have a
Uh,
marketing function
yeah, like 25 to 50
a
depending
month.
on the skill set, yeah, each month. And depending on the skill set, if they're a really well seasoned doctor, you could survive on 25 new patients a month. Um, it's also your patient demographic. Like, are they clean? Are you in a wealthy area where they don't have any issues? Or are
Sure.
you in a,
Income demographics matter. Yeah, sure.
yeah.
Well, I think
Um,
too, Addison, there's a big asterisk on that new patient thing because I think too many times it's all about new patient, new patient, new patient, but you also have to
What
watch the
type
back
of patient?
door.
Yeah, yeah.
No, it's well that too, but you have to watch the back door because if you're bleeding patients
Of
out the back
churn.
door,
Yeah.
then that's well, I mean, we don't need to get into that today, but that's a sign of multiple problems. But if you are
yeah.
bringing on 50 new patients a month, but you're losing 70 a month, that's a problem. Or
You're not growing.
50,
Yeah.
but losing 50. It's a sign of, it's a symptom of other problems, but that's and I know Addison knows this. I'm just kind of hitting the asterisks
Yeah.
there.
Sounds like a brand new episode to deep dive in,
Yeah,
Dan.
right.
Well, and that's true because yeah, they'll get the production on the front end, but then when they don't have as many hygiene checks 6 months later, they're wondering like, wow, something's funky about the numbers here. So yeah, I mean, it's net new patient growth. But at least depending on how they treatment plan, yeah, 25 would kind of be on the low end. You got to be at least generating 25. 50 would be great. It's also how many new patients is the senior doctor going to still keep? If I'm bringing in
Sure.
my second associate, am I okay giving away 90% of my new patients to them so that they can eat and I can slow down? And I think that's maybe the first gut check. And when I wrote my associate dentist manual, that's really the first chapter is, are you ready? And it like from an emotional and a financial standpoint, because you're going to invest a ton of emotional time, a ton of actual hour time, and a ton of financial resources
Yeah.
in both like going through the process, hiring, giving them a bunch of production. You're most likely going to take a pay cut, and then you're paying them on their production, and yet their collections aren't coming in for a couple months. And so you're wondering, oh man, and then you start to get a little bit cheap and you're like, well, I want a couple of those new patients so I can get production. And then
Sure.
they get mad. So you have to understand and be financially and emotionally prepared for all of the changes that are going to occur in the practice before you take a step down this road.
Would you recommend having like cash reserves, knowing that like profit may go down temporarily as you're onboarding this
Yeah,
new associate?
exactly. I generally say you should save up about 6 months of their salary, their base salary.
Perfect.
Now it's going to cost a little bit more than that if you have to hire a new dental assistant or you have to pay for some other costs. Obviously, some
Having
variable
some type
expenses
of
like
reserve.
labs and supplies, but about a 6 months of their salary
Okay.
would make you feel pretty good. At the 6 month point, most likely you will lose money the first 6 months of an associate.
Sure.
At the
As you're
6 month
onboarding
point,
and ramping.
as you break even after 6 months, it's usually then great as long as they're a good culture fit and your whole staff isn't ditching you and saying this
This
person is not
person
the right
sucks.
fit.
I'm out. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
That
and
goes
that's
back to your
and,
feeling
and,
comment.
Yeah, and Addison, I think that's a really important thing for people to prepare for because I don't think that they're ready for that dip in revenue. They don't know.
Yeah.
They think, oh, I'm bringing let's say you take on an associate that's got 5, 6, 10 years of experience. You're still going to get that revenue dip just because it's a change in practice. Your
Hmm.
take home is going to go down simply because you're now pushing stuff into you got to keep that associate happy and that dip's gonna be shorter. If you get a new grad and you're training a new grad, you better have a training protocol in place and have something in to get them up to speed quickly, because the longer you wait on that, the longer that dip's going to be. And that's our experience been. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and expectations on,
Interesting.
timing, types of procedures, you want to get them up to speed, shorten the learning curve as much as possible so that they're producing well. Now, no matter what, anytime you bring an associate, team members, they're used to one way of doing things. You add in another
Change.
human being to the mix, you're probably going to have some stress, maybe some changeover. And so you got
Sure.
to be expectant of that. And you got to know that at least at some point in the first couple months, they're going to come to you and say, this person's not a culture fit. They don't know how to do a class 2 like you do. And you got to kind of have that
That
doctor's
was two
back and
things you
just
just
say,
said there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And you
you
got to
said that.
be willing to kind of take that hit.
Well,
Here's. Oh, go ahead, Dan. Then I'll make my
well, there's
comment.
something, that you just hit a sore spot for me. And what that is the personality adoption, right? So they have the team has to adopt the new personality, and they're
Yeah.
not only are they used to the way that you do things, it's a shift for the entire team to get used to the way that instruments are handed, even like the process in which, even if they do it the same way you do it, they do it a little bit different, and everybody's
Yeah,
got to
sure.
adjust to that. But then there's the personality adoption. They have to adopt the personality, and inevitably you're going to get some type of like concern or question from your team about this new associate. They're going to come up and be like, oh, but he just doesn't do things like you do him, Dr. Nelson. And it's like, oh, okay, but is it wrong? Are they doing it right? Are we
Yeah,
getting
that's
a good outcome?
what's the
Yes, they
data?
are,
Yeah.
but yeah. So, okay, so this is just adjusting to a new situation is what this is. And it, the more they're exposed to it, I think it gets a little bit easier, but there's still sometimes, and heaven forbid you have a personality clash. And that's, in Addison, with as many associates as you've had, I'm sure you've run into that multiple times. And that's a
Yeah.
challenge. And so, yeah, I'm curious, how do you handle that?
Well, I mean, you gotta just try to work through the interpersonal. Like when I had 6 locations, it was a little bit easier to say, well, let's move you around. Let's spin
Sure.
the cycle and like mix everything up again. But it does happen all the time where the assistants and doctors, for whatever reason, just don't seem to mesh super well.
Hmm.
Or what's happened a lot is that the doctors, especially young doctors coming out of school, sometimes they don't have the leadership bug and they
Sure.
don't understand that their position is now you are a leader. My partner, he's a ex football player, college football player here in Nebraska, which pretty much means you walk on water. And but he said no matter what they taught him first week in college is you are now a Husker football player. You get in a car accident 10 years from now, the headline of the newspaper will say ex Husker football player gets in car accident. No matter what, you are now pegged as that. And I try to impart that wisdom on the dentist here is you have a DDS and you're the dentist, you are now the leader. Whether you want to be the leader or not, you are the leader and you have to communicate like a leader, you have to act like a leader. Everything you do will be under a microscope. If you're on your phone checking social media, it's going to be looked way differently than if the dental
Yeah.
assistant or the sterile tech is doing it.
Yep.
So just the way that you're perceived. And so you kind of have to immediately, you get to say, like, I know you're the associate. You don't really have a decision in how things are done here, but no matter what, you're the leader. And so you got to, once you step into the operatory, you got to act like the leader and lead from that mindset. So it's a total shift, and sometimes it's pretty tough to balance. And sometimes you actually have to have even though they might have been a great assistant for a while, if there's some clashes, you have to have your doctors back and, basically say, okay, hey, things aren't working. We'll help you find a new dental home somewhere else, but can't work
Sure.
here.
Yeah. I would also say like anytime I've gone to like smaller practices, the lack of like core values and understanding of them. Like I was talking to my mom runs a dental office. I was literally talking, sorry, mom. I was literally talking to her. I'm not going to throw you under the bus. the other day, and she was talking about some of these clashes that you're talking about, right? It's a two doctor practice, and you guys know how it goes. And I was kind of picking her brain. I'm like, well, like, does a team have like a set of core values that they're all aligned to and like interviewed for and trained on? She's like, what are core values, right? I'm like, yeah. So there's a problem, right? Like people aren't on the same page of how we operate as a practice. And then I would say that's the biggest thing. Back to Ideal Team Player. That is like a great book to start the initial core value process. If your practice doesn't have that, that's kind of when I'm hearing this conversation, that's where my mind's going. I'm like, oh yeah, well, are they like basing their decisions off of data? Like this is the assistant saying, well, he's not really good at whatever procedure because that's how she feels, or is like, what's the data behind that? And that's kind of how my mind is working right now in this episode. What are the core values? How can you make sure that you're hiring and maintaining those core values within the practice so that you don't have too many people problems. You're still going to have people problems, but at least it's refined.
Yeah, I think
Oh,
that's
yeah.
a big, huge thing is if you don't have core values and set up in your practice, you're not ready for an associate.
Yeah, that's one of
Yeah.
the KPIs. You need to have core values that you adhere to.
Well, and Dan, kind of, you go over to Africa frequently. So when you're in Africa, you got to trust that the practice is going to run
Mm,
on core values so that if they can't call you for 2 weeks and a patient comes in angry or something happens, you got to go back to the core values. And if you make a decision based on that core value, then I would trust that it's the right decision. And like that's kind of how I explain my core values to the team. Like we have four of
yeah,
them. I test them on their first day. We'd use them in interviews, just like
great.
Ideal Team Player book says. Like, and if you
Yep.
don't match these core values, it's going to be hard for you to work here.
Yeah.
And so, kind of warning them, hey, don't come here if this isn't
So
you.
good. Yeah.
But yeah, it's so important. And so for us, like fantastic guest experience.
What?
So I even talked about it yesterday in a team meeting. If they're super angry about a patient charge, if something goes wrong and it's our fault, we make a mistake doing something in billing, we eat
Mm-hmm.
that cost. Like I don't
Yeah.
care if
You take
it's
ownership. Yep.
$100 or $500. Take ownership, you make it right because we made the mistake. Now, if we do everything right, we should not make mistakes, but it has to be a fantastic experience. It's kind of like if you go to Disney World and they screw up something, they don't buy just that meal. They would buy all of your family's meals and say, "Hey, we're
Mm.
really sorry." Like they go above and beyond for their guest experience, and
Yeah.
that's kind of like what I
Delighting.
tell. Yeah, exactly.
Delighting the patient. What, Addison, if you don't mind me asking, you guys, would you be willing to share some of your core values in your practice?
Yeah. So top four are the only four. Fantastic guest
I got four
experience,
too.
and I say guest, so that includes the patient's parents, their kids, whatever. Fantastic guest experience. Number two, always be improving. So I'm all about self improvement
Okay.
outside of work as
Great.
well as business improvement. Hungry and humbly confident. So
Mm.
hunger and humble, but confident. Like you want your doctor to be confident in their treatment, in how they speak. Now you can be humble
But
and
not
be like,
arrogant. Yeah.
yeah, not
Yeah.
arrogant.
Yeah. The humble side. Yeah.
Um, and then have each other's back. So teamwork. I
Team.
expect people will do sterilization all day long. People will answer the phones all day long. Whether you're the doctor, down to the hygienist, down to the front desk, like you answer the phone because you have each other's back. And so
Love it.
those four are the main core values. And yeah, they seem to work well. I don't think we have to add any more yet, but
Yeah. Yeah.
those are good ones.
We have four as well here at Boom Cloud. One, you got to be a team rock star, so similar to what you're doing. Ours are a little bit more edgier because we're a tech company, right? So we got to make them cool. You got to be a creative psycho, so that's the innovation side of things. An ownership junkie and a performance maniac. So those are our four core values as well. We added, I think last year, ownership junkie, because I was energized by people that went above and beyond within our team and took ownership of all of our processes and our customers and all that type of thing, right? I'm like, oh man, we need an ownership core value. But yeah, I think core values are huge when it comes to finding the right people and then maintaining the right people, right? And hiring and firing based off of those core, based off of those core values. So that's how we operate. I think that's a huge piece when it comes to associates and any other person you're hiring for the practice. I'm a huge fan of that process.
Yeah, we're so big on it that we actually have these little trifolds that we.
Yes, I love it.
Yeah,
what are yours? Let's hear them.
Yeah, so ours are so we stole our first one from Kip Jones in Layton, Utah. He's a stud.
Sweet. It's great.
Teamwork, yeah, I mean, if it works, you hack it, right?
Yeah, so if it's working, yeah, take it.
Yeah.
So teamwork makes the dream work. Pump the positive, work hard, play hard, laser vision, and then the one I'll get to my favorite. Everyone is important, accountability, and then the Yoda effect. And we got this little.
You have fun ones too. Yeah, it's fun.
And part of the reason that we did some of these is if people are listening to this, they'll be like, I don't even know what that means. That's the point. That we want someone to ask, well, what does that mean? So that they'll be able to remember it, and second, they'll understand it because they have to dig into it. So
when I hear the Yoda effect core value, is that like I'm gonna coach the other people and help lift other people up, like with the force?
I'm glad you interpreted it.
I'm gonna guess. I'm gonna guess it.
All right.
Is it do or do not? There is no try.
Yeah, you can go down several paths here.
Yeah, all of that is correct. Yeah, it's the basically the samurai mentality, right? It's becoming perfect in everything you do, becoming the master of what you're doing, but that encapsulates everything that you guys just said. So the fact that you guys read into it correctly, that's a win. What we have now is young associates that come in and go, "Who's Yoda?"
No.
Oh no, you don't know who Yoda is. Like, we have to start over now with this. Yeah,
like, we're not hiring you, bro.
They're gonna be like, baby Yoda, the Mandalorian.
That was one of the tests.
Like, what? Yeah, what? Why? Yeah, why baby Yoda? That's weird. That's so good. I love that, Dan. That's great.
So I'm curious. So there are, and this is way too deep to get into it right here, Addison, but I know that like we have profitability formulas. You guys, I know have profitability formulas that you've established for associates, because it does affect, once you bring an associate in, things start getting crazy as far as overhead, things get weird as far as like tracking, as we're talking about, all these KPIs that come into play. But I'm kind of curious as to what you think is, give me two of the biggest pitfalls that docs, or mistakes that docs make with associates.
I mean, it's one of the biggest ones is the doctor is not ready themselves to hand off production, take the financial risk on the associate. And so that's kind of the first mistake is that, and then they go from there's too much work here to, I'm not doing enough work. And then they rebound and start, not feeding the associate enough work. So that rebound effect is then generally what hurts a lot of feelings and leads to early exits of associates.
Unfulfilled.
So that's one. Yeah. Unfulfilled expectations and just things just not working out well. And so that's the first reason why I see a lot of failures. And the second is just not holding them accountable with a system in place. You need to be prepared. I mean, hiring an associate is not like, well, they're going to show up next week. I better figure out what I'm going to do.
Yeah, better.
No, it starts in the interview process and knowing exactly what kind of dentist they are. Like go through every procedure that you do or that they should do, like implants, endo. Not just do you do endo? It's like, okay, for a central, like number 8, how long does endo take you on that one? For a premolar, how long does it take you? What molars do you do? How long does that take you? How many have you done? Have you done 2? Like, is it dental school, or are you doing 2 a week for the last 10 years? So for every procedure, you should kind of know, how are they doing? How long does it take? How do they match my style? And that's in the interview process. But then when it comes down to their starting, you should already have said, hey, these are my favorite books on organizational psychology, like whether it's Traction or Ideal Team Player or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, what are you reading that they should read? You should buy them that book a month before their start date so that you can kind of start talking the same language. And having a document of, this is how we do things, like the 3 questions. This is how, and having them have a pretty smooth onboarding of just this is how the treatment goes from the clinical operatory to the front desk to checking out to billing. These are just expectations of how we go. Because when they're brought in and they don't have any guidance, it can feel really like just you're floating and you don't know what to do and you don't know what's expected of me. And if you don't know what's expected of you, you're going to start doing things that you think, oh, I think this is what the owner doc
You
wants.
can start
And
guessing.
it's
Yeah.
like, yeah, and the owner doc's like, no, I don't, get out of my business. And so it just, it like unmet expectations in that regard and just a poor onboarding experience, or even just the poor first few months, that leads to a lot of failures as well.
We're so serious about what you're talking about in our practice, Addison, that we actually have a 2-year program set up month by month of it's got CE in it, what we expect them to be doing, how much we expect them to produce, what should be the the net on that production. We have it's broken down for 2 years. We have this because
Geez, that's awesome.
especially for someone that's new, even if they're not new, there is expectations that we have in our office, because our office is similar to yours, where we offer a lot of services, everything from sedation to implants to thirds to perio.
Yeah, stacks up fast.
So yeah, and so we don't expect our associates to do all of that, but they should understand some processes and know that the expectation is very clear, and it's so clear that we have it down for we expect you to be here for 2 years at least, and this is the program that we're putting you through, so that at Wood River Dental, you'll know what it's like to be a doc here, and so that's how serious we take it.
That's awesome.
I know you guys have got similar stuff as well, that it's available. You got books, everything for it.
Yeah. So pretty much a lot of the things that I put in my associate manual is things that I use in my practice, along with my two other co-authors, Dr. Jason Tenuri and Summer Casmel. They both have,
great.
Summer has like 5 associates, Jason has 10 to 15, something like that. So, I mean, it's been tried and true, and it's exactly, you have about an 18 to 24 month onboarding. It's not just the first, hey, 30, 60, 90 days, here you go, and after 3 months you're good. It's a full, what are we reading, what do we expect out of each other? CE, like let's start with this CE and gradually move up so that you can get them onto the same level. Because really, and that's like the end point of the associate, and this is going back to like, why do people want associates? It's because you're tired, you're burnt out, or you're looking for more free time, or maybe your kids are getting to that school age where they're maybe getting to some sports, and you're like, well, that's going to
Spend
be
more
Tuesdays
time.
and Thursdays afternoons, and I don't want to shut down the clinic, so I need to hire an associate to get to that point. So it's all about creating that freedom that you want. Maybe you want to teach more. Maybe you want to take more of like the implant CE so you can do bigger sedation cases, which would actually kind of take you out of the hygiene routine of the practice, and you need an associate to refill normal dentistry. So there's all sorts of reasons to hire an associate, but hopefully that if you do it the right way, even in a year,
It's
it does buy
impactful.
you a
Yeah.
lot more freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this has been an awesome. Go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
I just want to ask him one last question. I think this is one that's really important.
Okay.
And Addison, you having your expertise and you talk about this for just a minute would be super valuable. And that's, breaking up's hard to do. So what is your take?
Yeah, it sucks.
What is your
Straight up
take
sucks.
on termination, when to terminate, and then what is your protocol for termination? How do you go about it?
Excellent question.
Yeah. So, I mean, generally, you try to have enough honest and pretty, brutally honest, I'd say, conversations so that they know what's coming. And that's what's happened most of the time for me is I give them quite a few warnings and they know the trajectory that we're going. And I've even had people that, quit and I was gonna terminate them anyway, but they quit. And then they say, wait, maybe I don't want to quit the next week. I said, you already wrote me a resignation. Like
What?
we kind of came to an agreement. And so, it's never fun. I mean, it
Yeah.
sucks because
It's always hard, even if it's
even if
deserved.
there's some team members that liked them, there's others that didn't, or vice versa, and that you're going to hurt some feelings. But in essence, though, you have enough. You should have a frequency, a cadence of meetings that they know exactly where they stand, and
Yeah.
there should be pretty much no question. They just know it doesn't seem like I'm a fit here. And you're like, I think I agree. And that's
Yeah.
kind of how it goes.
Do you do written, when you have these discussions, do you give written warnings or written, what do you document so that
Like
this, you don't have
The
issues coming back at you?
in the final 30 days is a written performance improvement plan
I was
where
gonna
they're
ask
put
you
on
guys, I
probation.
was gonna ask, is there a PIP involved? Yeah,
Yeah,
that's great.
if you
That's
chat
great.
GPT how to terminate someone, they give you a PIP. So
Yeah. Is that where you got it from? Sweet. Yeah.
yeah.
Hey,
So
ChatGPT is
and
a resource. So
yeah. So I mean pretty much the final 30 days they know, oh, 30 days from now, if my clinical skills aren't better, my class twos like have a tight enough contact or my crown seats go better or my production picks up. If I don't do those things in 30 days, like,
yeah,
we're going to part ways.
we have
And
a
so they
similar
should know
process.
exactly the ones leading up to that are all verbal.
Yeah. No, that's great. And then I would imagine, do you do like weekly cadence meetings with your people?
For the first 6 months, pretty much I'd like to
And
have
then let
a
them go.
quick 15-minute, catch up, whether we're reviewing numbers or whether we're reviewing a case or something, reviewing a treatment plan they came up with. Every week, you should just kind of touch base with them and see how they're doing.
Awesome. Okay, Addison. Well, this has been an awesome episode. Where can people find your books and get more resources based off of this
Yeah.
episode?
So all my books are for sale on Amazon.com. But if you want to kind of see everything, it's AddisonKilleen.com. So AddisonKilleen dot
Okay.
com. Yeah, and I'm on Dental Success Network. We have a free 7-day trial if folks want to do dentalsuccessnetwork.com/7. I think, what is it? 7 free trial or something. I'm horrible.
Yeah, I'll
seven
get
day
the
trial.
I'll get the link from Ashley. We're good.
Yeah, exactly. 7-day trial. So, but yeah, and that's just, that's where I share a lot of stuff. But the best resources are all in the books. And so if people just want to if they have a specific issue and it's like, oh, I need the solutions for my issues, like that's a good place to go.
Awesome. Love it. Go check those out. We'll have all the links in the show notes so you can click and just get access to Addison's thoughts and documentations on how to do this. Addison, thanks so much for hanging out with us on the show today. Dan, as always, good hanging out with you, bro. With that
Absolutely.
said,
Thanks
with
for
that
having me.
said, yes, with that said, we hope all of our listeners have a rocking day.